Now, you've heard some of our proposals around the Gender Action Plan. I would like to invite the speakers for our panel discussion now up on stage so that we can continue the discussion. And of course, everyone in the audience is invited also to ask their questions and enter the discussion with us. And we have on stage Chris Ebell, Kathinka Evers, Ineke Klinge, Javier De Felipe, and Krista Varantola.
So you've heard the proposals for the Gender Action Plan, and now in this panel discussion we would like to take the opportunity to discuss hands-on how will the HBP work on gender equality in the future. And we've invited different experts, both from within and outside the HBP, to comment on the proposal and the future perspectives that they see. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome here on stage with me Christoph Ebell, who's the Executive Director of the Human Brain Project, Kathinka Evers, who's the leader of the Ethics and Society Subproject 12 and a professor at Uppsala University. Sitting right next to me, Ineke Klinge, who's the chair of the Horizon 2020 Advisory Group for Gender at the European Commission. And I believe you also coordinated the Gendered Innovations project together with Londa Schiebinger. I would also like to welcome Krista Varantola, who's the Ombudsperson for HBP, and as I've read, the Vice President of the European Women Rectors Association, as a longtime rector of Tampere University. Unfortunately, Francesco Pavone from Lens cannot be here today since his flight was cancelled. And I'm very happy to have found a great person to jump in and take over his seat. And this is Javier De Felipe, who's the leader of Subproject 1, Mouse organization here from Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. So thank you to all of you for being here today with me. I think we have a great panel, and I'm sure there will be very interesting inputs concerning gender equality in the future. So I would like, with the first round, asking the question to all of you. What is the take on the elements of the Gender Action Plan that was presented and that you had the chance to read in parts before? Maybe, Chris, you can start by saying, what is the institutional take on this from your perspective?
Thanks very much, Katharina. Good morning, everybody. It's still morning, right? So thanks for the question as well. So first of all, I mean, I'm extremely happy that we have a gender action plan. I mean, that's even in many cases, even a non-perfect plan is better than no plan at all. And I think this is actually a pretty good example of what we have here. So I think what we really the institutional take, if you will, what we really want to do here is to make sure that we're still relatively strongly at the beginning, or relatively clearly at the beginning of something that we're building, and making sure that we are integrating the policies that we have on there. At this point, I think we can still kind of adjust the course a little bit of the project. We're not at the very beginning, but at least I think in this phase, we have a really good chance now that we are on a stable course. We know where we're going. We have a pretty clear idea of what our plan is for all the other elements, and it seems just logical that we also have a plan for that element as well. And if you look at what we've heard this morning, there are different aspects. There's the institutional aspect, there's the knowledge aspect, and the research aspect itself. And I think what we can do now is to make sure that all of these elements work in concert, right? And just changing one thing or just one number will not get us very far. But if we're changing the whole ecosystem, if you will, of those different interacting factors, I think then we have a good chance to actually do something. And just one thing that I think is pretty exciting to me in this context is, as we are building a research infrastructure, we are actually in a position to influence and catalyze much more than just what we're doing inside of our project. So we can inspire that kind of change, or even require it to a certain degree, by putting certain standards out there. And we have those standards for all kinds of, let's say in research data sets, we have all kinds of standards. We can add those standards, and then basically everything that flows through our project can get that upgrade in a way.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to hand over to Kathinka and hear what is your reaction to the Gender Action Plan proposal.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to say that I find the survey on which it is based extremely well done, very interesting, and even though I didn't have great expectations for the gender situation within the HBP, I was negatively surprised, which I think is at least something to make us all think a bit who are working in the HBP. I find the Gender Action Plan very, very good. I think we will have occasion today to discuss more concretely what we can do as SP leaders, work package leaders, and also our role in society in this respect, because we do have a role in society as well as within the project. And there are many things to say there. But I suppose that we can go into the details as we go along.
Thank you very much for this initial feedback. Ineke Klinge, I would like to hear your perspective from your Horizon 2020 chair background, having an overview really of what is happening in the European Union. What do you think, what is the major challenge for gender equality in the HBP at the moment?
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to give my initial comments, and I know there will be time for discussing more in-depth issues this afternoon. So my first impression was one of disappointment, really, about the Gender Action Plan, because the survey and the presentation today have not or hardly addressed issues of content. And from my function in the Advisory Group for Gender, which is specifically charged to assist the Commission in suggesting ideas for a better implementation of the gender dimension, so the sex and gender analysis. That's a little bit hard for me to see, but on the other hand, I can maybe, and maybe you can clarify that, it could also be considered as the first steps possible in such a big project. And so that's one thing. But the other thing, which also came forward from Londa's presentation, it's also clever and a good strategy to address both aspects at the same time. So not to first secure women's participation, but at the same time address the gender dimension of research, because it's about the quality of research. And I think such a flagship project like the Human Brain Project would like to produce excellent research.
Okay, so your recommendation would be really to focus both on the numbers and gender and sex in research content. It was indeed a decision taken to focus on the numbers in leadership during SGA1, but I totally share your view, and this could be something that could be integrated in the Gender Action Plan also.
I would very much welcome that. And also because in the international context, the EU is asking for it, NIH is asking for it, the Canadians are asking for it. So I think the HBP cannot let it.
Okay. Javi, I would like to ask you, you told me you were at the demonstrations yesterday that took place here in Madrid. So in your view, what is the top priority that the HBP should take addressing gender equality?
Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, I think that this is a very good event that we have to discuss this thing, because this is really very important, and we should take this more seriously. They are excellent scientists, women, but they have to show up, no? And then we have to take actions on that as soon as possible. And I think that is something that we have to take action on this, you know. It's very important, and we have to try to help also the women in the science, because there are many limitations for them, but not for men. But other limitations are not are just only because we don't think too much about that thing. For example, there are if there are good women that can be task leaders or work package leaders or speed leaders, why not should be there? That is something that we have to think about in more in deeper. No?
Okay, so creating a process with more reflection. Krista, I would like to ask you also from your perspective, and I think your position as Ombudsperson is quite recent. So you have an important role there for HBP, and from this perspective, what do you think? What is the top priority in terms of gender equality for HBP?
It's working. Thank you. Can I start with another hat on my head, with from the EVORA, European Women Rectors Association. The O in the middle is just to help to pronounce it, EVORA, which really has. I was listening to your talk. It really has the same aims as you have in this project, and the aim is to promote female leaders. Of female researchers to take up leadership positions at universities, because there, if you look at the European universities, the situation is much worse than it is in the HBP project, even so. And it's and yesterday the EVORA showed its appreciation by recognizing the Swedish government for its work on equality, because the Swedish government itself calls itself a feminist government. And it has also shown, has been a long-term trend in Sweden, that education, training, promotion, encouragement helps. And that is why I think we have to start very early. It's not the right time to start when you're recruiting a postdoc. It has to be much earlier. So when women embark on research, if they want to become deans, or to encourage or rectors, or for that matter. But you need to start very early with this, I would call it encouragement training, but also, of course, it's not only encouragement, but involves all this. Is because the problem, as we've seen, is that the male networks are there. And I'm saying this now, I was thinking when I was listening to you that we don't try to make men feel guilty, because this is not what this is here about. It's about having men and women talk about these issues and thinking about how to ensure from the beginning that we have the right attitude. Because at many sorts of EVORA conferences and before that, we've noticed that men tend to avoid taking part. And I think it's partly a guilt feeling, not a feeling that this is the matter is not important. So, but somehow introduce systems, structures in different contexts. Whether it's because these structures are in place in the Nordic countries. For example, you have equality legislation. You have the rule that 40% of one sex of either sex in 40-60 rule in committees, in decision-making bodies. But this does not mean that it has reached the mindset yet. And I think that's where we have to concentrate on working together and having networks. If you have a network, I mean, you can't really interfere with private networks. But you can question them and sort of how certain appointments have arisen, where the matter has been discussed privately. Because I don't think the solution is to have male networks and male networks and female networks, but to have these discussions going on and who to promote, who is a good student, but not leave it to a single person, for example, was my. So some ideas.
Thank you very much, Krista. So, Krista, you stressed the importance of early career support and also of networks. Chris, if I can ask you the question, what are the next steps for the gender task or for gender equality policies that you see and would like to implement in the HBP?
Okay, I think that's a good question because it's a very concrete thing we can do. I mean, these are things that we have the privilege in this project to actually be able to implement. I mean, there is a lot of stuff that we can do. For instance, you say about networking, I think these are things that we can directly influence. We can directly facilitate diversity in networking. These are not per se difficult things to do, and I mean, we commit to doing those things already. And in the directorate, we've discussed this, and we're committed to the action plan. So in that sense, the rollout of this is something that we're absolutely committed to, and that includes networking opportunities. That includes essentially the recommendations that you have in the gender action plan. The mainstreaming, I think, is absolutely important. This should not come as some sort of like, oh, we did something, we're going to check that box. It should be just a normal thing that we're doing, and it shouldn't be something that people even realize anymore at some point that this is just a normal thing here. And I would like for people to come into this project and say, like, you know, when you come from the outside and you say, like, somewhere where this isn't the case, that you come in and say, like, oh wow, this is actually, yeah, this seems like how it should be done. And I think I want to just, you know, what you said in the introduction. I mean, this project has to be excellent in every dimension of its existence, not just in certain selected pieces, and that includes this. So I want to basically, from our perspective, I want to encourage everyone in the project, and literally everyone, to actually facilitate that. It doesn't always have to come, you know, from a top-down kind of, we're going to do this now, but like, really across the board, and the top-down and the bottom-up aspects have to definitely join there. What we're doing is we have money available. I mean, there's a gender task for that, but we can also, you know, through little policy changes, we can require things, we can ask for things, we can, like you said, you can say, well, we don't have to be brutal about stuff, but we can say, like, hey, did you think about that? Was that there? You know, did you talk about it? In most cases, you'll change something, and I think that is the job that that's why we also have the gender task in there, to make sure that we actually take care of that we are mindful of that, because lots of times, you know, we tend to forget stuff, and we don't want to do that anymore. We don't want to forget it.
Thank you. And this is really the interesting role also the HBP has. You can't really direct the partner so much, but you can, you know, create little incentives and nudges and influence the scientific landscape in Europe via these means. I'd like to connect to what you said on mainstreaming gender equality within HBP, and direct the question to Kathinka. As the leader of the ethics sub-project, are there any linkages that you see? How can your sub-project contribute to mainstreaming, or are there maybe existing structures that you see that could contribute?
Thank you. Well, yes, certainly. And I just got new ideas from Professor Schiedriger's excellent presentation of how to introduce the gender aspect. First, scientifically, we have one, and also what you said, Krista, about starting early, which I think is a very, very important point. We have a task in our philosophical work package, which deals with neuronal epigenesis and cultural imprinting on brain architecture. And this is a tremendously important area of research that combines philosophy, social science, education with neuroscience. And of course, the infant brain develops largely in response to learning and experience. Here, I think we can certainly include gender aspects, and I'm very happy to have thought of that, because I didn't think of that before, and I will from now on do that. So that's one thing. On a general level, I also think that part of what philosophers do well is argue. We know how to argue, create argumentation. And I think that I also think we should be able to start arguing within the HBP, trying to collect how could the HBP, both scientifically and socially and conceptually, become more gender relevant, gender intelligent. And this is, I think, very important to show that this is, well, of course, it's an ethical issue in terms of fairness and justice and equality, but it's very much a question of scientific excellence. It's partly because we don't want to lose out, as the rector pointed out, the 50% of the world or more that women constitute their knowledge and experience, but it's also because there is so much science that gets lost, and as we've heard, also clinical applications. So I think that from SP12's point of view, we do have the social science, the ethics, and the philosophy that can be active and should be active. There is also a part which is the ethics management. And when we first started to have ethics management, which is hands-on ethics, helping the HBP to actually comply with the jungle of regulations that are out there, not least in Europe, which comprises so many nationalities. At first there was a reaction of other SPs, well, okay, you deal with this. That's your table. And we said, no, no way, it's your table, but we are there to help you comply. So we are supporting you to comply, but it's your table. And this is how it is today. And thanks to our, I think, very good ethics management team, they put in place an ethics rapporteur system, which is that each sub-project has an ethics rapporteur who, and they all meet once or twice a year, and they discuss what are the ethics issues, how can SP12 help them, and so on and so forth. I think that a gender action plan could connect to the ethics rapporteur plan, because I don't think we should create perhaps a wholly new structure in an already complex structure. I think maybe we should have the same structures add the gender dimension in research, in ethics management, and in other areas that I can't think of offhand. So I've already gotten new ideas for my own sub-project, and I think it is certainly the case that we can be helpful, but every sub-project has the responsibility to assist, both scientifically and socially. Well, I mean, Javier, you can already now, for example, check how many of your work package and task groups check the sex of mice. And this fantastically important pain research conclusion that maybe mice and rats don't show pain to male experimental leaders. All this can be checked and worked on and integrated in our activities. So yes, I think there is a lot we can do, but every sub-project leader should have as part of their reports, what have we done? And ultimately, it's the SP leader who is responsible, I think.
Well, in the case of the study of the brain, the problem is that you have to choose in between different the gender, because the reason is that you add another variable to the study. So we are short in time to do something. For example, we are analyzing, let's say, connectivity of one brain region. So you have to choose the age, the gender, and everything, just to avoid more variability. For example, it's not the same to study the brain of 1 month old than 2 months or 3 months, females, males. So it's just that is the case. However, of course, the study of the gender differences are critical to study other features. So there depends on the objective of you are doing. Of course, the thing is that it's critical to analyze these gender differences. Of course, this is something very important. But one thing that is also critical is that why there are so many good scientists, women in the HBP, and they are not leaders or something like that. No, that is something that we have to discuss more in depth, no? Because we are looking for excellence, and sometimes maybe we don't think too much about that. For example, when we organize something, we just say something, a name or something, but you don't realize that we have to support more the women that are our colleagues, no? I think. So in other words, the study of gender differences and to understand better diseases and things like that is obviously a very important objective, but there has to be an objective of another objective. But if you analyze, let's say, like different other things like synaptology or something like that, you have to be more precise in the age and many other things, just to avoid this kind of variability.
I'd just like to add something in this context and also maybe address Ineke's disappointment at the beginning. I think and I think your point is extremely valid. So I just want to make sure that that we're understanding this as well. I think the project has obviously a task, a job to do inside of the project, but we also have the opportunity to actually lead change across our borders, so to speak. The reason is, I believe that we are working very intensely with big data, with data science, machine learning, algorithms, artificial intelligence. That's one of our core competences, just from the interdisciplinarity that we have. We are also working intensely with biology and the biological basis for that. So I think we have, as a project, we have a specific responsibility here, because I think there would be a very bad cognitive dissonance if we had on one side a pretty detailed knowledge about how the biology works and how complex and detailed it is, and then ignore that and go and write algorithms that sort of ignore that knowledge that we just that's been generated in the other side of the project. Bringing this together, I believe, is one of the core functions of this project that can actually change the way we do this kind of science and the way we do this kind of programming in terms of a more transparent way of doing it. And I think we have the opportunity to actually make those things transparent. We can say, where are those decisions made? Where in the algorithm is the clicker, right? And how does it correspond? Does it correspond, and how does it correspond to the biology? And have that, by exposing that, I think we as a publicly funded project, we don't have to go to our shareholders and say, well, yeah, we're kind of hiding this because it drives the sales. We don't have to do that. What we can do is say, look, here it is. And I would like to at some point arrive somewhere where we have a certification for algorithms that can be certified to be gender neutral, or to a certain degree at least. You say you can rely on this thing to not give you the type of results that that bias in one way or the other. And obviously that has to be discussed, what the measurements would be and so on. And I think that has to, but we can contribute to that conversation quite substantially.
Yeah, so this could be a first concrete idea also for a follow-up event, to have a workshop around gender sensitivity in algorithms and how this kind of certificate could look like, to have some brainstorming around that. Krista, I think you wanted to say something as well.
Yes, if I may now put on my research integrity hat, ombudsman hat, and get back to what Kathinka said. I was thinking of this, about gender issues, ethics issues, and in practice, it's the issues that we've been dealing with in Finland in our National Board on Research Integrity. Sometimes sort of they related to equal opportunities issues. So, but it's very difficult to prove anything because these ethics, gender, then so-called objectivity or merit-based appointments are always usually intertwined. And you're at the crossroads between research integrity, equal opportunities legislation, and then merit-based promotion, and how to prove that something is against equal opportunities legislation. And usually these matters are also handled by different organs at universities, so that's another issue. We have a few examples where we've when we have been able to intervene, and things like that in projects where one of the researchers has gone on maternity leave and then is forgotten when she gets back a couple of years later, and her contributions so that somebody else gets the authorship of an article where this female has been very would have deserved it. But otherwise it's, and then we've come across old boy networks that try to bully, but this is I would say this is something that's disappearing because of many generations of researchers and scientists. The old boy network is getting older, hopefully, and disappearing. But also some interesting preconceptions, like in one case, it was a couple, and the man was alleged of misconduct, or then proved not to be true. But he and his wife were working at the same place, so he was dismissed, and so was the wife, who had nothing to do with the case as such. And in another case, it was a man who was junior to his wife, and obviously in the translation situation, he had been granted authorship because he needed some publications for his CV. But he got very angry. Although, and a woman who was there before in the original article, who was an author there, had been left out. But he got very angry that in some of the documents it was mentioned that he was the husband of the leader of the project. So there's this, so these are interesting, many of them subliminal issues that you don't know, that you expect. I think it's the traditional, if a man does something wrong, the wife knows about it, but not vice versa.
Yeah, so you're outlining many compliance issues related to gender equality, actually concerning promotion, authorship, sexual harassment, which is big on the agenda at the moment, might be one as well. So there's a few issues to be addressed. Ineke, I would like to give the word back to you because a few of the replies refer to your initial statement. So maybe you can react and also give us an outlook on the Horizon 2020 framework. What are the requirements and what future developments do you see?
Okay, thank you. So back to content issues. Yeah, okay, that's my field of expertise. Well, I'm very happy that the Commission is supportive of this gender equality policy encompassing all three aspects: gender balance in research teams, gender balance in decision making, and sex and gender analysis in research and innovation content from the very design of a project. And I'm very happy to learn that with Kathinka there has been a bell ringing about how these issues can be brought to those sub-projects who address basic and biology topics. And that's very promising. And I think all tools and methods and support systems are available for even if researchers might feel that they are the first now to address sex and gender in their research. Because of the global landscape, many materials have been developed in the Gendered Innovations Project, but also by the NIH, more addressing the basic and animal research, and also by the Canadian Institute institutes of gender and health, in particular the Institute of Gender and Health, which has developed a lot of tools, but also a lot of trainings for them who want to very quickly and accessibly learn about sex and gender in biological and health research. And that's also where I wanted to give a little comment back to you. Of course, integration of sex and gender analysis depends on the question, but it cannot be as an argument, okay, maybe it's done in a small amount of cases, but the bottom line of gendered innovations and this third objective of the Commission is that extrapolations from males to females, not based on research, cannot be tolerated in the future. So the work of the advisory group on gender has, a number of already documented progress made. There was an interim report on gender as a cross-cutting issue in Horizon 2020, and one of the activities of our group has been to give specific recommendations for all the parts of Horizon 2020. So that's not only health or medicine, but also energy, food, including ICT and all technological parts, for a topic for which sex and gender aspects are relevant, and this has resulted in the gender flagging of those topics. And upon monitoring in this interim report, we can see that the number of gender flagged topics has increased, and it means that special attention then is warranted from the proposers to address these aspects. So this is some progress. It was only the first 2 years that have been monitored this, and since then our group has given a lot more recommendations to all these parts. And so from the next steps, it is that the Commission should continue this gender equality actions integrated all along the funding process, and at the same time there's some room for improvement. It still needs to invest in understanding the gender dimension, what it means, a sex and gender analysis with the proposers, but also with the reviewers and with the evaluation panels, concerning the more practical or formalistic details of such a policy. This should be reflected, for example, also in the form at an evaluation panel. Is there a specific question under the excellence criterion? Have you addressed the gender dimension? Is it, and you could even go further, and these are examples from Canada, that you develop a kind of metrics. So how well is sex and gender analysis addressed? Okay, but that's for the future, I think. For this moment.
Thank you so much. I think Javier would like to reply, and then I will open the floor for discussion with the audience.
Well, it's a brief comment, but maybe one good solution will be to have an open call to study gender differences, because
as part of the project. So a specific amount of money for those. There's the possibility to have calls within the project.
Yes.
And to then advertise specific calls with
exactly.
a specific amount of money. I would appreciate that.
Yeah, because the study of has to be very clear, the objectives and what you are looking for. But the gender difference is something very important, so that is okay.
But then as an extra opportunity,
exactly,
not to do away with that, as Kathinka said, that it should be incorporated in every sub-project.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but rather by adding expertise, because this is also the expertise of EAF Berlin focusing on HR policies, and it would be good to bring, with an open call, in expertise on research content in HBP via such an open call, for example.
Yeah, no, because the reason I say that is because when you want to integrate information, physiological, molecular, anatomical, genetic, is critical to use the same point of the age, the same gender, the same, everything as much as possible, the similarities, just to integrate data from many people. And then you have then specific problems. It's about, for example, what is the influence of gender or the hormones or something in the structure of the brain. So these are a specific question also that has to be dealt with. So depending on what you are looking for.
Okay, so I would like to open the floor to questions. I'm sure there's some, I see some hands raising. Please go ahead.
Hello, good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for all your presentation that were really interesting. My name is Manuela Martorana. I'm from University of Milano, Italy. And inside the Human Brain Project, I'm the one that is define administrative managers. But I think this is a very limited definition, because what I do is not only to take care of figures, but also to try to harmonize, the scientific part and task of our group with all the other, transferable sides of our research. And I'm talking about Italian situation because, for instance, for the morning, the previous presentation, there's a lot of variability, among countries, and I think that I might talk also about the Mediterranean area in Europe, which is very different from the North countries. And because we are sorry, but in Italy the gender area is limited to what we call a pink quota, but it's not only that. I mean, especially when now we are going to report in to the participant portal, and there's the gender section, and we have to report how many women and how many men are taking part in our group, in each group to the research. But I think that this data it doesn't say much. It says that there are a lot of there are women and men in the team, but it doesn't say if women are the task that women are carry on. It's just a figure, and I'm very, our colleague before was asking, was very interested in what the policy support to the gender and diversity area topics can give and can support, our work. And I know that Human Brain Project, with this, even with this workshop, or with the task of gender and diversity section can be. In Italy, can be, just like an icebreaker, something, that can give something more, can help us in doing something to reach, the level of other countries. But I think it's also very important that our national government and the European Commission can, just harmonize their effort. And it's a lobbying work. It's not just a single and local reality task.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. So I understand you're interested in the issue of harmonizing the policies across member countries. I don't know if Ineke or Kathinka, do you want to react? Yeah.
Well, that is, thank you, a very important question. I'm sure Ineke has much more to say about that than I do, but just one reflection which I've already made several times today and before coming here is that to me the one really key issue is family structures. And as you may know, Swedish women have a lot of children, and there is no tragic choice between career and children because we have childcare and the work is divided between men and women. Men are also very happy about that because they are happy to be able to stay at home with the child when the child is small and profit from those wonderful years. And these are equal opportunities for men and women, so and it's legislated. They can stay at home with full pay. The time is constantly changing, but I think it's approximately 1 year each. And if one of them choose not to take their year, the other cannot take it, so then they lose a year. So this is not a woman's trap. Otherwise it would be. So I think there are many such issues, because if we start having female representation, which is very important and very good, it is de facto going to lead to a reduction in childbearing, which I think is a sad consequence, or to women being torn apart, which is also a sad consequence, because you can't fulfill all these roles simultaneously. And this, I think, I don't know how to do this in Italy, and one of my doctoral students is Italian, so I know, and has small children, and thinks that Sweden is a total dream. But it's not an inaccessible dream, and I'm not sure how to deal with it. I'm sure Ineke can.
Okay, yes, about harmonization of policies or of advocacy. I know Italy and a number of Italian colleagues that the issue of gender medicine, so issues related to content of biology in medicine, is quite a strong, quite strongly organized in Italy, and several forefighters, like Professor Fanconi. She is in the government of Basilicata, but also was a professor at Sassari University. And I remember that there was even a bill or a proposal for a bill to the parliament to establish gender medicine as all over Italy. So I think Italy is quite proactive in some domains, but only lately, and I learned that just last year from friends, but also from Italian researchers, that gender has become a controversial issue because it's interpreted as transgender, and then it meets with the Catholic Church. But that's another issue.
Yeah, this is really the challenge in the Human Brain Project, to address this variety of national settings and institutional settings, and integrate them in also in gender and diversity policies. Okay, I think there was a next question in the same, yeah. And okay.
Maybe, I think my question was very similar, but regarding to the Spanish maternal leave, because it's only 4 months, and it's very similar. My question is regarding almost the same that you, from your point of view. So it's.
So it has been answered.
So it's, yes, it's already answered.
Okay, Landa Schiebinger, please.
Oh, thank you. My name is Katharina Boosted. I come from the. Sorry, did I take your? I come from the Graphene flagship, so I'm the odd bird here, I guess. The Graphene flagship, there are 2 flagship projects, of which HBP obviously is one, and I represent the other. I'm the head of administration there. I have a question regarding how this is to be implemented in the project. Do you see a reluctance from the scientists to turn towards involving women more in the higher levels? Because we have a very severe attitude problem in our project. How do you address that if that is the case? I don't know who this question is for, but you know better.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being here, and I would like to add also what in the gender task, what we heard from many people in HBP is a frustration that things are not moving so fast as they would like to see it. So maybe you can react to this question, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, that's it is indeed is not an easy one to deal with. I mean, obviously, there is a difference between what people say in public, and and they commit to and say, yeah, this is a great idea, and definitely do that. When you go outside and in a coffee break, you're listening to what people are saying, and they're making jokes about, what's the safe distance now to a woman and so on. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that actually happens. And I mean, obviously, decision-making processes, when they are hidden and not transparent, then they can, that will still happen like that, and you will get decisions that ultimately are slowing you down in this process. So for me, this is mostly a governance question. And I think for any policy that we have to have the adequate implementation structure in terms of the governance. It has to be congruent to what we want to achieve. So that's one aspect. There's another aspect, I think, is dialogue. We haven't. And we're actually, I'm giving you this a sneak preview to our next summit. We're going to try a social experiment there and try out a new way of actually structuring dialogue so that we can surface all of these things properly and actually deal with them, because that's the one of the things that isn't happening in this type of discussion a lot of times, is that we're not actually surfacing the things, because certain things you can't say or you don't want to say, but they're actually important because they are ultimately hindering the implementation and slowing you down and giving you this attitude problem that you're talking about. But if you can integrate, especially in a group, and this is the privilege that you have as a big project, if you can integrate those thoughts and surface them and then deal with them on a rational basis, you're getting way better results. And we want to try and implement the kind of dialogue culture, I would say, in the project that helps us to deal with such things. And it's not the only thing. We have other things too, where change processes have to be implemented. So we're trying to address it like that, but I would just simply also acknowledge that it is not easy, and certainly a process that we're looking at. And if you allow me, I would also say there is this sort of societal dialogical process, but that should not hinder us from insisting on the scientific excellence part, right? They're connected, but they don't follow the same logic, right? So that's important to, you're getting better decision making on implementing content things if you have a better structure around it. Nevertheless, you cannot say, well, we're kind of in the process on the way there, and therefore we're just going to defer the excellence part to some indefinite point in the future. So I think that's also important to recognize for us as a management point.
Katrin, did you want to comment on that? Sorry, Londa, you're next on the list.
I mean, there are obviously some things are relatively straightforward, and we can address this, and we started it already. When it came also more clear, and we became more aware that this is a problem, let's say. So the last summit, for instance, when we selected the speakers, so this is always a question how you select the speakers. So there are many proposals, and we noticed that there's a disbalance. So we tried at least to bring in second moderators, women, to have more balance on the scene. So this was a relatively easy decision to do, but it was very difficult to change at that point the proposed speakers. So then we tried really also to easy implement, to have more PIs as task leaders. This was also one of our immediate coming outs from your questionnaire, and at least some of them are here, which became task leaders in a very informal way, because we discussed it with the work package leader and said we want to have more visibility for young women. In some sub-project it worked well, and in other it did not work at all. Yeah. And I mean, there are steps which are really difficult. For instance, having more SP leaders, this is really hard because there is an election system, and we can only indirectly influence it, and also not very quickly. So this is our highest leadership. And it's even more difficult when we think about a stakeholder board, yeah? Because it's the countries, the member states that are electing their stakeholders. So this is really very tough work. And we see a lot of resistance, of course. We see a lot of arguments, we do not have anybody else. So there is nobody else to do it like this. So for me, a good take-home message is that, these networks and databases, they are for me extremely important. I also see a danger, if I'm honest. So if we force, for instance, or if we motivate female reviewers to come more on board and female speakers, at least I have a feeling that I have to do twice as much as some of my male colleagues, because I'm invited in every committee, yeah? So everywhere. Which is also a little bit an odd situation, honestly speaking. So this prevents us really, these are very practical problems which we also have, including cultural problems. And my impression is that those disciplines where the biggest problems are not really aware of it at all here, and not responsive at all. And it's easier to go into communities which are already approached to this problem. Medical community, they are quite open. Psychological, they are quite open. Others are much more difficult to handle in that respect. So there are different levels at which we should act, and we have already acted. We are aware that this is not sufficient at this moment, but it's really hard to change things, and it's not a thing that you can do it in 1 year. Unfortunately, many of these activities are really long going. Yeah.
Thank you very much. In view of the time, I would like to give the last intervention to Lonna Schiebinger.
Thank you very much. So I have two responses here. So one of the things we're talking about is fixing the institutions, so fixing the climate and attitudes. I didn't see anything in the Gender Action Plan about unconscious bias training. And I don't like the word training, but scientists respond to peer-reviewed scholarship. So and there's a lot of great scholarship on the unconscious biases, and in many instances this is not included in scientists' education, and they've had no opportunity. So you just need to worry about a backlash, so it has to be done in you're going to do some kind of experimental something. It needs to be a very friendly, open format where people can learn and then, as you were saying, express any attitude and have a dialogue, open dialogue. So that's one suggestion. And then I was very interested in what Kathinka was saying about how to integrate the sex and gender analysis into the Human Brain Project. And I wanted to link that up with something you said, Francesco, that there might be extra money. And it's very important that if you're including sex and gender analysis to make the science excellent, it not be done in a separate division or added on, or it needs to be right in the design of the research. And what the NIH did in the United States was to take that extra money and offer it for teams that that needed extra money to do the sex analysis, for instance, if you need many, many more control groups for animals, or whatever it is you need that scientists perceive is more expensive about implementing a good design of research, you make extra money available. We've done that in our medical school at Stanford also. I'm about to try it in engineering, in the engineering school for more of the algorithm and robotics work. So that's one way you're holding a carrot out to people. Here, we're asking you to do this excellent work, and here are the means. So if there really is some funding, I think you can connect this all up.
I am Javier. I am not Francesco.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Anyway, yeah, no.
Okay,
I am not in the agenda.
Sorry.
I was here. So one thing is what I said regarding the gender differences is I think is very important. That issue. Indeed, we have been working on that a few years ago with Lydia, that is here present. And the only issue is that is a subject is, for example, is the goal. What are you looking for? You are looking for certain things. It's better to use a certain gender or something like that. It's the only thing. But I agree that would be very important to also to include a more weight to the gender differences, because it's critical, of course.
Okay, I was permitted one last line of comment, and that's related to what you said about missing something about implicit gender biases. Well, one of the products of our advisory group for gender was to produce a report on implicit gender biases at work at the evaluation of proposals. And this was a report that was commissioned by the Directorate of DG Research and Innovation. It's a report bringing together all available evidence, trainings, etc. And it's publicly available online. So for anyone, if you, as a project, might like to invest in that effort, it's available.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to be a bit pushy. We are running 30 minutes behind the planned time, but this also shows there's a lot to be discussed. So I'm very happy about discussion. And also I took out a few very concrete propositions and suggestions from the discussion that we can take on in the Gender Action Plan when we discuss the final proposal, such as focusing more on gender issues in research content, for example, by issuing an open call or specific funding for teams who want to expand on that, focusing on algorithms and the reflection around that, thinking about integrating a gender and ethics rapporteur system together, and last but not least, proposing unconscious bias trainings. So I think this was a very valuable discussion. Thank you very much for participating.